In my past life, my younger half-sister and I were born on the same day. Yet because she bore a phoenix tail birthmark on her forehead, all deemed her destined for heavenly favor. Our mother registered the lively, energetic half-sister under her own name and raised her with care, while casting me, quiet and reserved, into a separate courtyard, never once inquiring after me. When we came of age, our parents spared no effort to send my half-sister into the palace as a noble consort, showered with boundless honor, while I was hastily thrust into the eastern palace as a concubine to the crown prince. Later, my half-sister fell out of favor with His Majesty for meddling in state affairs and was demoted to commoner status. Yet the crown prince cherished me like a precious jewel, protecting me in every way. During a palace banquet, my half-sister Qiao Zhuang, who should have been confined to the cold palace, escaped and sought to die with me beneath the flower-shaded arbor. On the day of my coming-of-age ceremony, my younger sister refused to enter the palace. A consort is ultimately a concubine. I implore Mother to help me marry into the Eastern Palace and become the future wife of the Emperor. The moment Xin Yao spoke, the room fell silent. The Emperor is old, yet the Empire remains unsettled. Xin Yao knelt on the ground, her gaze unwavering. The Crown Prince's faction is deeply entrenched. He will surely ascend the throne. Father, Mother, only if your daughter enters the Eastern Palace can our family hope to rise again. My parents, seated on the high dais, exchanged bewildered glances. They never imagined the ever-innocent and free-spirited Xin Yao would utter such treasonous words. Standing behind Xin Yao, I knew the moment I heard her words that she too had been reborn. In my previous life, the moment the Emperor issued his decree for the imperial selection from noble families, my parents rushed to arrange everything for Xin Yao, to prevent me, their unwanted daughter, from spoiling their plans. My mother hastily shoved me into the Eastern Palace without so much as consulting me. I still remember that day, the first time I begged my mother not to send me to become a concubine in the imperial harem. But she only looked at me coldly, as if I were not her own flesh and blood, but merely some stray cat or dog of unknown origin. Yaoer is my true daughter. She closed her eyes and wrenched my hands from her skirt. Your temperament bears no resemblance to mine. Even your destiny is so ordinary. Destiny again. Over these past years, I've heard those words countless times. I fell to the ground, helplessly watching as the palanquin from the Eastern Palace carried her away. Recalling that dreadful hellhole, I shudder involuntarily. If given another life, Crown Prince, I would never marry again. As for Xin Yao, if she desires it, I shall gladly step aside. Xin Yao's words swayed Father. He had navigated the treacherous bureaucratic landscape for years, climbing to a second-rank official through sheer perseverance. His Majesty, benevolent and wise, has always clashed with Father's principles of governance. Sending Xin Yao to the palace was merely to advance Father's career. But now, it seems they have found a better option. The Crown Prince and I do get along reasonably well. Father hesitated for a moment. But His Majesty is still in good health. If you could bear him a prince, wouldn't that be more secure? Xin Yao recalled the Emperor's ruthlessness toward her in her past life and shook her head fiercely. Even if I bear a son, it will take years for him to grow. Should any misfortune strike in the meantime, wouldn't all our years of planning come to naught? Father fell silent. Mother's gaze fell upon the phoenix tail mark on Xin Yao's forehead, and she too was momentarily speechless. All were convinced Xin Yao bore the celestial phoenix destiny, yet none knew when it would manifest. Father! Xin Yao seized my skirt hem, her voice brimming with joy. Our family has not only me as a daughter, there is also my elder sister. Let my sister enter the palace for the selection, while I marry the Crown Prince. Would that not be better? Mother looked at me, hesitation etched on her face. In the end, Father slammed his hand on the table and decided I would enter the palace. I knew this outcome was inevitable, but when I met Xin Yao's triumphant gaze, sorrow welled up inside me. whether in my past life or this one. When it came to my parents' love, I could never compare to her. That evening, as the matron prepared my belongings for the palace, she couldn't help but sigh repeatedly. I knew she was grieving for me, yet I couldn't voice the many flaws of the Eastern Palace just yet. I could only reassure her, entering the palace doesn't mean I'll become a consort. Rest assured, with my wit and intelligence, I might even secure a position as a lady-in-waiting. The matron chuckled, but her smile quickly faded. Lady-in-waitings have always been few. With your beauty, young miss, you're destined to be a consort. But the current emperor is not one to covet mere beauty. He governs with diligence, seeking only the prosperity and peace of the realm. The matron seemed poised to say more, but was interrupted by Chiu Rong, who had arrived alone. Young miss, the lady requests your presence. The matron rose immediately, her eyes and brows heavy with worry. After all, in all my years, Mother had seen me alone only 3 times. The first was my birth. She disliked me at first sight and refused to see me for years afterward. The second was when I turned 7, she deemed me silent and dull, banishing me to the country estate. Now, this third time, I forced a smile. It must be to instruct me on how to assist Xinyao in the palace. Just as I suspected, Mother launched into a long speech the moment she saw me. Every word revolved around Xinyao, occasionally punctuated by her dissatisfaction with me. Yaoer is destined for the phoenix's fate. This is immutable. Never, under any circumstances, must you compete with her. You were born mediocre. Even with our efforts to secure your place in the palace, you'll likely only attain the rank of a lowly concubine. She seemed to have decided I was destined to be nothing but dust in this life, hastily sealing my fate with just a few words. But Mother, did you ever know that by age 4 I could recite scriptures and classical texts? And by 5 I composed poetry effortlessly? During those years in the countryside, I studied medicine and treated the poor. Several physicians praised my brilliant talent and kind nature. Yet in your eyes, I never existed. Meeting Mother's stern gaze, I slowly voiced what I'd longed to say in both lifetimes. Mother, by agreeing to enter the palace, I repay the debt of your nurturing grace. I bowed deeply. Henceforth, your daughter owes you nothing more. Within the room, the flickering candlelight offered only silent stillness in response. On the day I entered the palace, I made only one request: to send the wet nurse back to her hometown. Supporting her with money, she had painstakingly raised me for over a decade, like my own mother. Watching the wet nurse depart, my heart ached. Yet when I turned back, I saw Mother leading Xinyao to a banquet. The crown prince's selection of consorts was imminent, and I knew they were scheming for that very purpose. Sister, Xinyao flashed me a sweet smile. Your younger sister wishes you swift ascent and a lifetime of splendor. I gave a faint, forced smile. Splendor or not, I knew little of that. What I knew was that Xinyao's path was destined to be a short one. The crown prince is violent by nature, deceitful and two-faced. To be his legitimate wife, I shall patiently watch as others' blades drive Xinyao to her doom. On the day of the palace selection, His Majesty sat upon a high dais, personally choosing the imperial consorts. When my name was called, the emperor suddenly inquired, I hear the Shin family boasts of Phoenix Maiden of Heaven. Raise your head, I wish to hear your thoughts on this rumor. I lifted my gaze as protocol demanded, only to gasp in shock the moment I saw His Majesty's face. It was him, that gentle uncle I had once saved by chance in the mountains. 3 years ago, at my country estate, I was so fixated on finding a certain spiritual herb mentioned in an ancient text that I disregarded the matron's protests and followed hunters into the nearby vast mountains. I had planned to return before sunset, but I became so engrossed that I lost track of time, unaware even when I had become separated from the others. As soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, A bitter wind swept through the mountains, following the river in search of an exit. I stumbled upon a man lying half submerged in the stream, gravely wounded. At first, I hesitated to help. But then I saw that though he was unconscious and deeply fainted, he still clutched a scroll tightly in his hand, clearly written and methodically organized. It detailed effective methods for flood control. At the very bottom of the scroll, one sentence was emphasized. Worried for the nation and its people. My heart is filled with dread. That single line compelled me to save him. Water management techniques serve the nation and its people. A physician's compassionate heart is no different. He and I must be kindred spirits. His Majesty clearly recognized me as well. Yet the Son of Heaven's emotions remain hidden from view. I could only choose my words carefully. Responding with caution, the phoenix destiny of the celestial kingdom is but a folk legend. As the ancients said, a gentleman does not speak of the supernatural. My family dares not claim such destiny. We merely wish to offer our modest efforts to ease the burdens of your Majesty's people. Silence hung heavy around us, broken only by the tinkling of beaded curtains before the dais. Like a springtime melody, a dampness crept across my back. But I had no time to notice. Remarkable that one so young can speak with such wisdom. His Majesty's voice carried no trace of emotion. As light as an autumn breeze brushing past, Minister Shin has taught his daughter well. I shall reward him. What reward do you desire? Today, I shall grant it. I lifted my head to meet His Majesty's commanding gaze. My words earnest, your servant's daughter wishes to begin as a lowly court lady, studying the art of medicine. I humbly request your Majesty's permission. Is that all? I bowed my head lower. Yet my voice remained firm, your servant's daughter seeks nothing more than this. In my past life, I excelled in medicine. Yet after becoming the crown prince's favored concubine, I could no longer touch these forbidden books, those deemed improper by convention. Once, when I secretly leafed through ancient texts, Xiao Xiu stumbled in late at night. Drunk. His rage erupted instantly. He forced me to burn all my hidden books with my own hands. Then made me dance the Huxian all night, clad in a courtesan's gown. I considered defiance. But each time he threatened the lives of my wet nurse and the palace attendants. I delight most in courtesans. Yet even they grow tiresome after repeated use. His thick, wine-soaked breath sprayed upon my neck like a serpent coiling around me. Only a dignified, fiery maiden like you, skilled in the secret arts of the bedchamber, can truly captivate me. The humiliation of my past life remains vivid. Though I vow vengeance, I will never sacrifice my hard-won rebirth for this beast. This holds true for Xin Yao, and even more so for the crown prince. On my first night in the palace, His Majesty summoned me. In the brightly lit hall, he was bent over his desk, too engrossed to even lift his head. As I prepared to kneel in greeting, his voice cut me off. Only you and I are here. Must we observe such formalities? Shin Meng, you've truly charmed me deeply. His tone seemed to carry a hint of laughter, softer and gentler than the sternness of the daytime audience hall. A warmth spread through me. Your servant dared not reveal her true name that day. I pray your Majesty will not hold it against me. Meeting the gentle gaze before me, my courage grew. These days of endless rain, I wonder if your Majesty's pain still flares up. Candlelight flickered, and for a moment, it felt as though we had returned to that country retreat 3 years prior. Uncle Hishi taught me the ways of the world and granted me a fleeting yet profoundly precious kinship. I have my own understanding of how your parents treated you. His Majesty sighed softly. Had I a daughter like you, I would cherish her like the apple of my eye. How could I bear to treat her harshly? I smiled, yet found no words to respond. Perhaps it was fate. Or perhaps Shinyao's temperament mirrored her mother's exactly. Or maybe father also believed my stars clashed with his, destined to conflict. But regardless, from this day forward, I had no further connection to them. Hone your skills well in the Imperial Pharmacy Bureau. May you soon stand on your own, alleviating the people's burdens. His Majesty beckoned me forward, his voice gentle as he said, Minister Shin, I await the day your fame echoes across the land. The day my fame echoes across the land. In both past and present lives. This was the first time anyone had spoken such words to me. My nose stung with emotion as I bowed slowly. Your servant shall not disappoint your Majesty's high expectations. I shall not fail your Majesty. Nor the ancient medical arts I've studied. Nor the 2 lifetimes of enduring humiliation and hardship. Returning to the Bureau of Medicinal Herbs late at night. I tiptoed into my quarters only to find someone waiting inside. Judging by her attire, it was Cui Xiao, the chief lady official overseeing both the Bureau of Medicinal Herbs and the Bureau of Monastic Garments. I bowed as required. She did not bid me rise, merely tossing a crate of soiled garments toward me. The lowest-ranking female official was not confined to her specialties. Laundry, cleaning, and tempering one's character were equally indispensable duties. I nodded in acknowledgement. I concealed the Emperor's summons for you. If you wish to live peacefully within the palace, do not speak of it freely. Within the harem, advancement depends on His Majesty's favor. But to survive, one must never cross those you work alongside. Though Auntie's words carried gravity, I sensed she was teaching me the ropes, not deliberately being harsh. Your companions have already washed today's garments. It's nearly midnight, hurry now. I set to work, while Cui Xiao watched nearby. I tentatively suggested, Auntie, please rest first. I'll finish this quickly. She gave me a faint glance, keep your mouth shut while you work. I obediently fell silent, only speeding up my movements. Meanwhile, my aunt sat on the veranda, flipping through a poetry collection by moonlight. The book seemed well-worn, its pages yellowed and creased in places. It was clearly a treasured possession. I knew my aunt was skilled in managing the imperial court's garments, all the emperor's robes since his ascension had been her responsibility, but I hadn't realized she cherished poetry so deeply. You've worked hard today. Auntie rose as I finished washing, tucking the poetry collection back into her bosom. But you must not sleep in tomorrow. On your first day of duty, there can be no mistakes. Remember? I nodded again. Only after watching Auntie walk away did I breathe a slight sigh of relief. Life in the palace wasn't as dreadful as I'd imagined. 10. Half a month after entering the palace, the day for the Crown Prince's selection of consorts arrived. Even though I'd never cared about such matters, I still heard whispers about Xin Yao. Because of the phoenix birthmark on her forehead, she caught the Empress Consort's eye on the day of the selection. She was immediately granted the title of secondary consort, awaiting only an auspicious date to enter the Eastern Palace. The Shin family is celebrating their legitimate daughter's selection with lanterns and street offerings. The palace maid Kaiwei murmured beside me, but I seem to recall Xin Yao isn't the Shin family's legitimate daughter, she's a concubine's child. Ah, Meng. Is this true? I remained focused on sorting the herbs in my hands. Does it really matter whether she's legitimate or not? Of course it matters. Only concubine-born daughters like us get sent to the palace for such grueling, thankless work. Legitimate daughters marry into noble houses to become mistresses of the household. Kaiwei snatched the herbs from my hands, her face urgent. Just tell me, is she really a concubine-born daughter? I answered truthfully. Kaiwei seethed indignantly on my behalf. Is it all because of that phoenix tail birthmark? This fate is utterly unfair. I didn't directly address Saiwei's words. Instead, I sorted the different herbs in my hand to show her. Viola tricolor grows wild in the countryside. Cheap and common, yet it's an excellent remedy for clearing heat, detoxifying, invigorating blood, and relieving pain. When His Majesty stays up late reviewing memorials and his eyes swell and ache, this herb is the most suitable for his medicine. While the Huiche Chow herb shares similar properties, It's exorbitantly priced and possesses an intensely bitter taste the emperor dislikes. Thus, the imperial pharmacy rarely stocks it. Comparing the two, which would you choose? Kai Wei answered without hesitation, the dandelion. Of course. I smiled faintly. Even medicinal herbs aren't judged by price, but by efficacy and individual constitution. How much more so when it comes to distinctions between legitimate and secondary offspring? Saiwei's eyes widened as she suddenly embraced me. Though that was a bit convoluted. I think you make a very valid point. Her innocent expression amused me, and we both burst into laughter. Who would have thought sister, so reserved at home, would be so talkative in the palace? The voice behind us was light and playful, accompanied by a smile. Evidence that sister is skilled at disguise. Those around us recognized the birthmark on Xinyao's forehead and promptly bowed in greeting. Only Saiwei's expression darkened as she shielded me behind her, the crown prince's consort. May you be well. The girl deliberately emphasized the words consort, and I understood she was venting her frustration on my behalf. Xinyao. Of course. Caught Saiwei's implication, her face turning slightly pale. A consort is still a consort. My rank is higher than yours. You should also perform the full court bow before me. I took Saiwei's hand and steered her aside. Xinyao had always been fiercely competitive, especially regarding the distinctions between legitimate and secondary status. She was riding high now, and I didn't want my actions to bring undeserved trouble upon others. I performed the full ceremonial bow to Xinyao according to protocol, my words brimming with utmost respect. Seeing my submissive demeanor, Xinyao's expression softened somewhat, though her words still held a sting. Sister, now that I have entered the Eastern Palace, I hope you won't hold it against me. After all, this was meant to be yours. I listened quietly. The crown prince treats me well, and so does the imperial consort. Xinyao smiled brightly. Such good fortune isn't granted to everyone. Is it, sister? I lowered my eyes submissively, naturally. Mother has been exhausting herself for days preparing my marriage and has now fallen ill. You didn't know, did you, sister? I replied indifferently. Then a physician must be summoned. Mother is ill. Yet you remain so unconcerned? I forced a hint of urgency. This servant is indeed anxious. You. Xinyao fumed. Sister, you truly are dull-witted. No wonder mother dislikes you. I nodded. The lady does dislike me. Kai Wei burst into laughter, her lips straining so hard they nearly pulled past her chin as she struggled to stifle it. This palace came to see the imperial consort today, but the hour is late. I hastily replied, it is time to depart. Xinyao bit her lip, staring at me, seemingly stunned by my shamelessness. After all, in our childhood squabbles, I had never once bested her. Watching Xinyao storm off in a rage, Kai Wei finally threw herself into my arms, laughing. Ah, Rong, you're so amusing. Ha ha ha. Your sister's face is twisted with fury. I tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Don't speak for me again. In the palace, keeping a low profile is the wise path. Kai Wei squirmed in my arms. In this palace, I only like Aing. Of course I'll protect Aing. Her words came without hesitation, yet they struck me deeply. So this was the warmth of sisterly affection. Not just mutual accusations and rivalry, but such simple, heartwarming words spoken without thought. For Cui Auntie and Kai Wei alone, entering this palace had been worth it. After Xinyao left, Cui Auntie summoned me immediately. She asked me nothing, only entrusted me with a task. The emperor's birthday is approaching. I've finished preparing his garments. You shall present them before the banquet. I hastily agreed. Auntie smiled. Don't you wonder why I'm entrusting this to you? What if something goes wrong? You'd be the one to take the blame for me. Auntie wouldn't do that. I bowed and spoke slowly. Auntie always holds His Majesty's affairs in the highest regard. She would never use this matter for any underhanded scheme. After a pause, I added, nor would Auntie stoop to such things. Auntie Chui said nothing more. The lamplight in the room was dim, and I couldn't quite make out her expression. Only after a long while did she wave me back. Just as I turned to leave, she suddenly called out, awing. Startled, I turned back. Auntie lowered her head. The imperial consort is the crown prince's birth mother. Henceforth, you must treat her matters with utmost care. I understood instantly. It was Xin Yao. She was the type who refused to be wronged. Unable to gain an advantage over me, she would seek opportunities to strike at those close to me. I should have seen it coming. Earlier, when she couldn't match my embroidery skills in the mansion, she secretly punished the matrons. I turned and knelt before my aunt. Please tell me the truth. Aunt, I don't want to implicate you. The news that I had ruined His Majesty's garments was spread the very next day by Aunt Shui herself. This matter didn't even need reaching the Emperor. The overseers of the Medicine Bureau and the Imperial Garment Bureau alone could have sent me straight to the Eternal Alley. When the overseers from both bureaus came to escort me, I deliberately staged a scene with Auntie. This act wasn't to punish the Imperial consort, but to spare myself from further hidden harm. After the act concluded, I was escorted to the punishment ward with a look of utter grievance. Though Auntie had specially dispatched an old acquaintance to administer my punishment, instructing him to show mercy, 20 lashes still left me flayed and bleeding, my legs drenched in blood, and the punishment was far from over. I had to drag my battered body back to the Medicine Bureau within half an hour to avoid another round of punishment. I thought I couldn't do it. But when I stepped out of the gloomy entrance of the Yong Alley, on the Tiannan Street drenched in spring rain, I saw Kai Wei leading dozens of sisters holding oil umbrellas, waiting for me. Ah, wrong. Sai Wei's robes were drenched with raindrops. Yet she seemed utterly unconcerned. The order only stipulated you must walk back to the pharmacy bureau within half an hour. It never said no one could accompany you. Just walk. We'll support you from behind. Distant thunder rumbled. I stared blankly at Kai Wei, my voice nearly failing me. This will drag you all down. Go back. Ah, wrong. Inxiu, who always loved bickering with me, stepped forward. She looked at me quietly, her fingertips cold and crimson. Last time we argued, I fell ill the next day. Yet you still finished all my tasks. Those tedious, meticulous chores. Her voice caught. Now that you're in trouble, if I abandon you, I'll never be worthy to work alongside you again. The others echoed her words. Tears instantly welled in my eyes. The pain in my legs nearly toppled me. Yet my sisters insisted they'd stand behind me, supporting me through this journey. I've forgotten how long Nantian Street truly is, but I remember running this very stretch when I escaped the prince's confinement in my past life. Back then, the road was dark and endless, and I ran in terror. Today's path, though drenched in rain, is forever bathed in light. I lay in the Medicine Bureau for half a month, and things remained relatively peaceful during that time. Seeing my suffering, Xin Yao and the imperial consort ceased their troubles. The emperor's birthday fell on the 19th day of the 11th month. All eunuchs and palace maids without duties that day were granted leave. Even low-ranking female officials like us were granted half a day of leisure. Kai Wei leaned against my bedside, her eyes heavy with sleep, awing. These herbs all look the same. How can you tell them apart? I handed her my notes. Classifying herbs by category and efficacy wasn't too difficult. During my convalescence, I transcribed from memory the prescriptions I'd seen in the hands of a young physician in my past life. I was waiting only for my recovery to present them to the Imperial Medical Bureau and my seniors for preparation. These prescriptions were rare treasures. In my past life, I'd stumbled upon them by chance. The owner, poisoned by bone-corroding toxins, had entrusted them to me in his dying moments through a twist of fate. Time had passed, and that physician was likely gone now. As I quietly lamented this loss, a commotion suddenly erupted outside the window. Kaiwei went to listen and returned with a pale face, relaying the news. "The fifth prince has fallen ill," she whispered. "I hear the imperial consort forbids the Imperial Medical Bureau from attending to him, claiming that since today is His Majesty's birthday, the prince's severe illness is disrespectful to the emperor. Consort Shu could only summon a few from the Bureau of Medicinal Supplies to tend to him. It's truly pitiful." I struggled to rise, but what illness is it? Convulsions throughout his body. A fever that won't break. The other palace maids didn't elaborate. I immediately got out of bed. "Dear sister, fetch me a few medicinal herbs." "No." Kaiwei grabbed me by the arm. "I know what you're planning. But the imperial consort already harbors resentment toward you because of the crown prince's secondary consort. You mustn't go." I steadied myself, leaning on a wooden rod used to prop open the window, precisely because of that. I must go. Before the crown prince ascended the throne, any imperial son could have taken his place. In my past life, when His Majesty learned of the crown prince's licentiousness, he too contemplated deposing him. At that time, the fifth prince, long overlooked, became his foremost candidate. I refused to believe the fifth prince's birth mother had no hand in this. Consort Shu has always been gentle and gracious. Before entering the palace, she was renowned in the capital as a woman of great talent. Yet after giving birth to the prince, she ceased all ambition and gradually faded from public view. Being unassuming does not mean such a person cannot shoulder great responsibilities. On the contrary, those who remain unflappable in the face of turmoil are often best suited for high office. This time, I wish to take a gamble. I cannot recall how many hours I spent administering acupuncture, gathering my qi, and feeding the freshly brewed medicinal broth to the fifth prince. Only after completing all this did he gradually calm down. Now he lies in bed, like a sleeping child. "Genre, Your Highness, rest assured, once the fever subsides, he will be perfectly well." Consort Shu exhaled a long sigh, her eyes reddening. "I am deeply grateful, Physician Shen." After returning her courtesy, I prepared to depart. But Consort Shu called me back. "Shen, may I see the prescription you used just now?" Thinking she doubted my competence, I promptly handed her the formula. To my surprise, Consort Shu glanced at it and immediately began weeping. "So it was him. How did you come by this prescription?" Gripping my wrist tightly, her eyes bloodshot, she demanded, "Is the owner of this formula still alive?" After careful consideration, I revealed the truth, deliberately omitting the absurdity of my rebirth. Upon learning the young physician had passed away years ago, Consort Shu finally broke down in sobs. "It's my fault. Ultimately, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have entered the palace. I shouldn't have. Father was so ruthless, how could he ever truly spare him?" So that was the reason. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to recover for a long while. That physician had been poisoned before his death. Besides this prescription, he had clutched a silver hairpin. Only in his final moments did he entrust me to cast that silver hairpin into the lake. Emerging from Consort Shu's palace, my heart ached intensely. Her heartbreaking sobs moved even me, an outsider. Crossing the imperial garden, I intended to take the moonlit path back to the imperial pharmacy. Yet by the hillside, I unexpectedly encountered the man who had haunted me through 2 lifetimes. That familiar silhouette drew closer, halting abruptly just steps away. Xiao Xiu leaned against the rockery. Through the hazy moonlight, he smiled at me with profound meaning. "I've been waiting for you for a long time, Minister Shen." I felt as if I'd fallen into an ice cellar. The humiliation and agony of my past life surged back instantly. I couldn't even muster an instinctive reaction. merely standing frozen in place. The stench of alcohol wafted into my ear as Xiao Xiu murmured provocatively, "I hear His Majesty the Emperor favors you greatly. Is it you who now manages all the medicines used at his side?" A sliver of clarity returned to me. His words made it clear, he hadn't been reborn. "Your Highness. As one favored by His Majesty. I serve with utmost devotion." "Is that so?" He pulled me close with one arm. His smile lecherous. "Then allow me to show you my favor as well." "How does that sound?" I struggled and screamed. But he clamped his hand over my mouth. "I find you dignified and composed, that's why you catch my eye. Don't be ungrateful." Tears welled up as darkness gradually swallowed my vision. Why? I had clearly been reborn. So why couldn't I escape Xiao Xiu? Just as despair consumed me, Xiao Xiu behind me suddenly groaned and collapsed. Consort Shu held a stone in her trembling hands. Staring at me. "Your Majesty." She raised both hands, shaking her head repeatedly at me. "Shin Meng. You helped me. And I saved you. We're on the same side now." I stared at her blankly. Her voice trembled violently. "Shall we make a deal?" "What?" She drew closer. Her voice faint yet every word distinct. "Support Genre to become crown prince. In time, he will give you everything you desire." She grasped my hands. Her beautiful almond-shaped eyes brimming with tears. "His Majesty treats you well. I know you have the ability. I beg you. Please help me." After that night, Xiao Xiu never came looking for me again. Only Xin Yao, seeing my wounds healed, repeatedly sought trouble. First it was irregular menstruation, then dizziness and nausea, until finally she claimed pregnancy and specifically demanded I attend her in the Eastern Palace. "Sister, as a lady-in-waiting of the Imperial Pharmacy, caring for royal women is your duty. If you refuse and it's investigated, you'll suffer again. Attending to the imperial family is this servant's duty. But there is no precedent for entering the palace to provide care. This servant can prepare the appropriate prescriptions for Her Majesty to take back to the palace for use." "Humph." Xin Yao sneered coldly. "What servant this? What servant that? Call it a lady-in-waiting if you like. But isn't it just a servant in plain terms?" I replied sternly, "Your Majesty, I am unworthy. But I was promoted yesterday to 6th rank imperial physician. I am not the servant you speak of." Xin Yao froze. "Who granted you that title?" "His Majesty personally conferred it." "Oh." Xin Yao hadn't heard yet. News of the 5th prince's illness reached His Majesty, who flew into a rage. He immediately punished the imperial consort and elevated Consort Shu's rank as appeasement. And because I saved the prince's life, His Majesty personally drafted the decree appointing me as imperial physician. Shin. Mother knows too? Xin Yao glared at me intensely. "I asked if Mother knows about your promotion." Here we go again. Even now, as the crown prince's consort, Xin Yao still carried the same air of superiority she had back at the estate. She feared I would overshadow her, dreading that my birth mother might no longer favor her. I smiled, smoothing my robes. "Your Highness, why must you be like this? Can't you feel how much Lady Shin cherishes you? Acting so cautious makes it seem like you're walking on thin ice with this affection. What nonsense are you spouting?" Xin Yao instinctively raised her hand, but lowered it upon sensing her surroundings. She leaned closer to me. "Mother loves me. Of course. After all, I resemble her more than my elder sister. Her own flesh and blood." I took a step back and bowed. "Oh. This servant congratulates your Highness on resembling the lady. I will ensure you enter the Eastern Palace." Xin Yao spat out her threat. "To displease me is to displease the young prince. Let us see how many heads you have to bear the consequences." The young prince. This is no malicious curse. But Xin Yao will never bear a child. I examined her pulse records, weak and slippery. Bleeding signs appeared as early as the 3rd month. Court rumors say Xin Yao, desperate to secure favor, Even learned the waist dance from courtesans. Her waist not slender enough. She commissioned pills from outside physicians. Her unstable pregnancy is surely the bitter fruit of her medication. Unable to secure my services, Xinyao reported me to the imperial consort within days. When her attendants summoned me to her chambers, Xinyao lay pale and wan upon her bed. At my entrance, she hastily adjusted her headdress, forcing a smug expression onto her ashen face. Had my elder sister heeded my counsel sooner, she need not have offended Her Majesty the imperial consort this very night. I curtsied and asked, "What exactly do the imperial consort and the secondary consort wish of this servant?" The imperial consort waved her hand lazily. "I am weary. Would Lady Shen be so kind as to massage my legs? Those trained in medicine possess certain skills in their hands. If you can bring me comfort, it shall count as fulfilling your duty." So I was here to be her servant. The imperial consort certainly knew how to humiliate someone. But she didn't know that in my past life, I'd done this kind of work countless times. Occasionally, when Xiao Shiyu was in the mood, he'd even order me to perform certain unspeakable acts for his subordinates. Xinyao looked at me with unhurried composure. Serving the imperial consort is alleviating His Majesty's burdens. Could it be that you, sister, are unwilling? I massaged my wrists and dutifully complied with the imperial consort's demands. Just as I'd anticipated. No matter how hard I worked, she found fault with everything. One moment she complained my touch was too heavy. The next too light. One moment she was thirsty and demanded tea. The next hungry and ordered me to feed her porridge. As the sun dipped below the western mountains, the imperial consort finally grew weary. Seeing my trembling hands, she exchanged a knowing smile with Xinyao. "Go kneel for an hour outside. My legs, my dear, grow more aching with every stroke of yours." Her maidservant led me to a path paved with gravel. "Shangrong, kneel here. Though secluded, this spot won't disturb Her Majesty's rest. Henceforth, Shangrong, know your place. Do not provoke Her Majesty's anger again." I knelt down slowly, a bitter laugh rising in my heart. I had thought Xinyao possessed some extraordinary skill, but it seems she too has run out of tricks. After the hour passed, I struggled to walk out of the Chuxiu Hall. Returning to the Imperial Pharmacy, I happened upon Auntie Cui, who was heading to deliver medicinal cuisine to His Majesty. She glanced at my legs and promptly handed the food box to me. Injuries shouldn't go to waste. Understanding her meaning, I hoisted the box and hobbled before His Majesty. Perhaps the medicinal ointment on my knees was too pungent. For His Majesty frowned. "What has happened to you today?" I kept my head bowed, stammering and refusing to elaborate. The eunuch standing nearby couldn't bear to watch any longer and spoke up on my behalf. After hearing this, His Majesty gave a cold laugh. "The imperial consort grows ever more like an empress. This secondary consort, this daughter-in-law, truly takes after her." He turned his gaze to me. "Today, physician Wen came to request permission. He reports signs of an epidemic emerging in the southern suburbs. He will depart tomorrow to investigate. You shall accompany him." I paused, taken aback. "Your servant does not yet possess the privilege to accompany the emperor outside the palace? According to the Grand Qi Palace regulations, only fourth-rank female officials may freely enter and exit the palace gates to procure goods for the emperor. I was but a lowly sixth-rank official. So study diligently and perform your duties well." The emperor smiled. "It would be best if you returned having accomplished something. Then, perhaps, I might consider promoting you." I nearly wept. "Your Majesty, I am deeply grateful for your favor." The eunuch attendant chuckled beside us. "The emperor truly favors Shangrong. Even this servant envies her. But then, Shangrong is so endearing. Throughout the entire palace, aside from the imperial consort." Realizing his slip, he quickly clamped his mouth shut. His Majesty tossed a memorial at him. "Old fox, Then he turned to me. If I had a daughter like this, she would be just the same. I lowered my head and smiled faintly. If only I could have a father like His Majesty. Half a year after entering the palace. This was my first time leaving. Dr. Wen, humble and kind, patiently answered all my questions about ancient medical texts along the way. As the carriage approached the Shin residence, Dr. Wen asked if I wished to visit home. Gazing at the Shin family's plaque, I felt only unfamiliarity. Lost in thought, I saw my mother emerge, dressed formally, likely heading to visit Shin Yao. Guided by the servants, Mother spotted me. I expected her to pass me by, but instead, she walked straight toward me. I clenched the folding fan in my hand. Yet when she reached me, she unleashed a torrent of scolding without a word of warning. Yaoer is now with child. Why must you oppose her at every turn? Mother looked at me with disappointment. Her eyes cold. Since you've been fortunate enough to gain His Majesty's favor, you should understand this is due to the respect he holds for our Shin family and the Crown Prince's consort. Otherwise, with your fate, how could you possibly catch the Emperor's eye? I slowly lowered the fan. I felt utterly ridiculous. Having been hurt so many times, why did I still cling to false hope with Mother? Over the years, she'd approached me only a handful of times, and each time was filled with scolding. Shouldn't I have grown accustomed to it by now? Dr. Wen stepped forward to defuse the tension. Mother treated him with relative gentleness. But when she finally turned to speak of me, she added, Shin Meng possesses mediocre talent. Your Excellency need not trouble yourself excessively, lest you encourage her arrogance and insolence. Dr. Wen froze. Miss Shin is exceptionally gifted. How can you call her mediocre? Mother seemed amused by this. She didn't speak until she was 3. Not even half as capable as Yaoer. Is that not mediocre? Dr. Wen fell silent. I fell silent too. Only after watching Mother climb into the carriage did Dr. Wen slowly sigh. It was my fault. I shouldn't have lingered here. I chuckled and shook my head. No matter where I am, Mother's disparagement of me remains the same. I only laughed at myself. Why did I still cling to such misplaced affection? The moment Mother stepped forward, I still hoped she might show concern for me. Even just a single word. The road to the southern suburbs was muddy and impassable, so Father and I abandoned the carriage and took a side path instead. But barely halfway there, soldiers blocked our way, refusing to let us proceed. Only then did Father and I realize the epidemic ahead was far more severe than the reports reaching the palace. In just half a day, we witnessed over a dozen corpses being carried out. My father was frantic, wishing he could transform into a mosquito to fly inside and see clearly. Covering my nose and mouth, I examined the symptoms of the deceased up close, straining to recall any fragments of this epidemic from my past life. But nothing came to mind. The southern suburbs were not far from the capital. Yet in my previous life, I had never heard any reports of an epidemic there. I only recalled that around midsummer, local officials had reported that after heavy rains, the reservoir had overflowed, causing torrential floods that swept downstream and killed countless people. Entire households in the southern suburbs had been wiped out. At the time, Xiao Xiu had been dispatched by His Majesty to inspect the southern suburbs. But he had merely gone through the motions, never even approaching the outskirts of the townships there. Since he never inspected, the officials' claims couldn't be considered truth. It suddenly dawned on me. Perhaps there was no flood release at all. For if it were a flood, the court would allocate funds to aid the victims, but if it were an epidemic, court officials would avoid it like the plague, fearing contamination. If the situation were dire, His Majesty might even hold local officials accountable. I sneered bitterly. What a fine bunch of officials. The people's guardians. Black blood truly flows through their veins. The heart-wrenching cries of a child in the distance snapped me back to reality. The woman lying on the ground was barely clinging to life. I jogged over and realized she still had a chance. Soldiers saw me approaching and hastily backed away. Move aside. Move aside. These are all destined for the mass grave. But she could still live. I struggled to break free from the crowd's obstruction and hoisted the woman onto my back. No need for your trouble. If she doesn't survive, I'll bury her myself. But since she still had a glimmer of life, I wouldn't abandon her. The infant on the ground seemed to be her child. Dr. Wen and I walked for a long time before settling them in a dilapidated temple nestled in the mountains. Our supply of medicinal herbs was too meager, and our equipment was inadequate. He planned to descend the mountain alone to seek help from officials. I held Dr. Wen back and laid out my thoughts in full. He listened, cold sweat pouring down his back. This. I should return to the palace and report directly to His Majesty. I nodded. Before you return, Doctor, remember, do not reveal your identity. Do not mention you visited the southern suburbs. Exercise utmost caution. After Dr. Wen departed, I fed the woman the concoction I had devised. But her lips remained tightly sealed, no matter how I tried. Nothing would pass. Seeing her pained expression, I couldn't bear it. I drank a bowl myself first, then sipped the second bowl before feeding it to her. After finishing all this, I was exhausted and drifted into a drowsy stupor. The woman must have woken up in the middle of the night. I didn't know how she recognized me, but the moment she spoke, she called my name, Shining. I jolted awake. You know me? She forced a smile. I am Yen Yang. Yen Yang. She was the woman the crown prince had brought back from the brothel in my past life? My voice trembled as I asked, could it be? You too have been reborn? She smiled, but said nothing. After the crown prince took me as his consort in my past life, he too frequented the brothels and brought back a charming woman. She refused to meet us. So even though she lived in the Eastern Palace for half a year, I never saw her. Everyone resented her because of her background. It wasn't until she attacked the crown prince at her own birthday banquet that we realized she hadn't entered the Eastern Palace for wealth or status. Yen Yang's elder sister had died at the crown prince's hands. Everything she did was simply to seek revenge. Alas! In the past life, her dagger ultimately failed to harm the crown prince in the slightest. Yen Yang slowly recounted to me her experiences after reincarnating. She had intended to take her sister far away, but she was still a step too slow. By the time she had gathered the money to redeem her sister's freedom, she realized this life's path diverged from her past one. The moment the crown prince took her sister had come much sooner. After wandering through many places, she reached the southern suburbs, where she accidentally contracted the plague. Even in this second life, she ultimately failed to save her sister. Miss Shin, don't you wish to avenge her? Though gravely ill, her mind remained fixated on vengeance. When I recover, will you find a way to introduce me to the crown prince? I stared at her in astonishment. She chuckled softly. You needn't worry. I'm simply mad. Through past and present lives, this broken shell of mine lives only for vengeance. You never met my elder sister. She laughed until tears streamed down her face. So you could never know how deeply she cherished me. When our parents died in our childhood, she willingly entered the brothel to support me and my younger brother. She was a pure and virtuous woman. Why did fate treat her so unjustly, condemning her to perish at the hands of those beasts in both lives? On the day the crown prince's wedding procession stretched for miles in crimson splendor, my sister lay as dry bones in the underworld, forgotten by all. If I cannot avenge her in this life, I shall have no face to meet her in the next. My voice hoarse, I pleaded, if your sister were here, she'd only want you to live well. But Yen Yang's resolve was unshakable. No matter what I said, she would not listen. After a long stalemate, I resolved to aid her. Some obsessions are better served by support than by urging surrender. Besides, this life differs from the last. In the past, Yen Yang fought alone. But now she has me in consort Shu. After physician Wen returned to the palace, matters progressed much more smoothly. His Majesty punished the local officials and dispatched physicians from the Imperial Medical Bureau to personally tend to the disaster victims. I was among them. Male physicians could attend to male patients without issue. But female physicians were traditionally avoided when examining women. My presence greatly facilitated matters. The plague that had plagued the people repeatedly finally subsided completely when the first autumn rains arrived after the height of summer. On the day I returned to the palace, I overheard rumors on the street that the crown prince had taken a new beautiful concubine, favoring her daily, and had even angered his majesty and the noble consort over it. I listened quietly, knowing in my heart that Lady Yan's plan was already unfolding step by step. On the day I returned to the palace, His Majesty summoned me. True to his earlier promise, he declared that upon achieving merit, I would be promoted. The robes of a fourth-rank palace attendant already felt heavy upon me. Standing before the bronze mirror, I finally allowed myself to truly look at my reflection. The woman reflected was dignified and composed. Resolute and powerful, was this not precisely the form I had yearned to embody in my past life? It seemed beauty, after all, was not beyond transformation. Truly, as the ancients said, one's appearance mirrors the heart. During the customary greeting to the imperial consort, I encountered Xin Yao. Her belly was high and swollen, she must be nearing childbirth. You must be feeling quite smug, right? She looked utterly exhausted. Yet she refused to show any weakness in my presence, after all these years of living in my shadow. Now that you've suddenly gained favor, you must be feeling quite pleased with yourself. But don't forget, I replied. I am now the crown prince's consort. I carry his blood. Compared to me, you will always fall short. I sighed inwardly. When would Xin Yao ever understand? From the very beginning, I never once thought to compare myself to her. We were sisters, meant to be as close as branches on the same tree. But she refused to see it that way, and I wouldn't force her. Still, no matter what, she shouldn't have treated me, her own flesh and blood, as an enemy, harboring resentment day after day. You must be exhausted, right? I offered a gentle smile. Living like this, constantly treading on thin ice, is truly difficult. Her eyes widened. The one struggling to survive is you. You were the one never cherished by our mother. You were the one born foolish and incompetent, while I was born with the destiny of a phoenix, favored by my parents, beloved by the imperial consort, and cherished by the crown prince. She trailed off. For before her, the crown prince embraced Lady Yan. Lost in their passion, they paid no heed to the crown prince's consort standing behind them, a woman still carrying his heir. Mother will help me. As if struck by a thought, she added, it doesn't matter that the crown prince favors others. I still have the Shin family behind me. But you have nothing. I looked down at my palace attendant's attire. Nothing at all? What a laughable statement. Even without parental affection or sibling support, I possess an official position, medical skills, the emperor's trust, the care of my aunt and wet nurse, and all the sisters in the Imperial Pharmacy Bureau. I have myself, and the people and things I wish to protect. That is enough. After all, I, Xin Yu, have always relied on myself. Xin Yao's delivery that day was quite difficult, and mother even came looking for me, something she rarely does. Having heard I was skilled in gynecology, she sent word without hesitation, demanding I leave the palace to attend to Xin Yao. The young eunuch guarding the medicine bureau gate panted as he relayed the message. I responded coolly, tell Lady Xin I'm too mediocre to deliver the crown prince's concubine's child. The eunuch didn't understand, but she's your own sister. Your Excellency. Yes. My own sister. That night, I tossed and turned, haunted by memories of the dark days in the Eastern Palace from my past life. My body was bound, my mind restless. When I awoke at dawn, my head pounding, Kaiwei informed me Xinyao had delivered a stillborn child, bleeding uncontrollably. She likely could never conceive again. I remained calm. After all, I had anticipated this outcome. What I hadn't foreseen was my mother submitting a memorial that very afternoon, storming into the palace to confront me. The moment she saw me, her hand shot up. It was the first time she truly intended to strike me. But in the end, Aunt Shui intervened. Mother's eyes were bloodshot, her voice hoarse and strained. "Yaoer is your sister. She was the Shin family's long-held hope. Why did you destroy her? Why? Now she has no child. My Yaoer, my poor grandson, what wrong have they done? It's because their fates clash with yours that this has happened." I couldn't help but laugh. Shinyao's child died, what does that have to do with me? And if we're talking about blame, what about my child? My child was killed by Mother and Xinyao with their own hands. In my past life, Mother and Xinyao conspired to lure me out of the Eastern Palace. I don't know what Xinyao told her, but my so-called mother immediately confined me in the mansion and forced me to drink a bowl of cold soup. Your fate clashes with Yaoer's. Now that the Crown Prince favors you, I fear that when you conceive, it will harm Yaoer's child. It would be better not to bear it. I will forever remember my mother's expression then, her face twisted with fury. Her eyes filled with nothing but hatred for me. When I gave birth to you, I nearly died in childbirth. Now that you've drunk this, you've repaid the agony I endured that day. We are even. I was forced to drink the bowl of cold soup until my blood trickled down, staining my robes crimson. Only then did I realize I was already pregnant. Perhaps this very event enraged Xiao Shiyu from my past life. He seized upon it as an excuse to ally with the imperial consort and bring down Xin Yao and the entire Shin family in the palace intrigues. Even during our exile, my mother still clung to the desire to see me. She raved incessantly that if not for me, how could the Shin family have fallen? As long as I remained in the Eastern Palace, she spent every day wishing for my swift death. At 3, I longed for her embrace. At 5, I yearned for her to push me on the swing. At 7, fevered and delirious, I dreamed repeatedly of her cradling me, calling out Menger over and over. At 9, when bandits attacked and I leaped into the river, my final thought was, if Mother learns I'm gone, will she shed tears for me, as she did when Xinyao fell ill? At 14, she brought me back. I thought she sought to mend our broken mother-daughter bond. As I approached her step by step, I suddenly realized she no longer held the authority I remembered from childhood. I no longer feared her, nor did I harbor any expectations of her. Madame Shin must have lost her mind. Carry her away for proper treatment, and see that she never returns. I spoke slowly. Madame Shin's heart is too venomous. I fear she would defile the grounds of our pharmacy bureau. After losing Xin Yao, she descended into madness. Her mouth spewed venom, her behavior wildly erratic. I expected her to curse me, but Kaiwei, who was ordered to tend to her, said no. The consort now refuses to see Lady Shin. She regards Lady Shin as a raging flood or a ferocious beast, directing all her resentment toward her. She paused before continuing. When I went to tend to her health as usual, she suddenly regained her senses and asked me to relay 2 messages to you. I set down the ancient text and turned to Kaiwei. I'm sorry. Your life. I've ruined it. The winter snow, held back for days, finally fell tonight. Gazing out the window, I drifted into a hazy memory, a year when Xin Yao and I were still children, when she would call me sister. A crimson cloak wrapped her like a New Year's painting doll, her tiny hands cradling a snowball. Xin Yao held it out to me with eyes crinkled in delight. Big sister. It's snow. Beautiful snow. Time passed. Years later. I never again saw snow as pure as that winter night. Nor heard Xinyao call me big sister with such heartfelt warmth. Between us, it was simply impossible to go back. Xinyao lost her child, and the imperial consort fell gravely ill as a result. But her concern for Xinyao was not genuine, she merely lamented the loss of another tool to help her please His Majesty. I accompanied Auntie Cui to visit the imperial consort and happened upon the crown prince and Yan Yang in the Chuxiu hall. Though the crown prince held Yan Yang close, the gaze he cast my way remained as familiar as in my past life. Xiao Shiyu's intentions toward me likely still harbored unrelenting desire. On the way back, I pondered endlessly, convinced I could wait no longer. Every moment delayed meant greater peril for both Yan Yang and myself. The imperial consort's clan wields immense power, and Xiao Shiyu is His Majesty's eldest son. Unless he commits a grave crime, the emperor would never consider deposing the crown prince. I murmured to myself, a grave crime. Aunt Cui called out from behind me, the crown prince is to ascend the city gate to pray for the people's welfare. This year, his ceremonial robes are being crafted by the artisans of the Bureau of Imperial Garments. I looked at her blankly. Why was she telling me something unrelated to the Bureau of Medicinal Herbs? Aunt Cui paused, then led me into her room. What I mean is, I can help you. I thought I'd misheard. Aunt Cui had always been kind to everyone, getting along well with the imperial consorts. Why would she suddenly say such a thing? Consort Su harmed my only daughter. Taking one of her sons now is nothing. Aunt Cui smiled at me. I heard everything that night in the imperial garden between you and Consort Shu. That night, when Kai Wei told me you insisted on rescuing the fifth prince, I followed you. Little did I expect to uncover your secret. Ah-ing. Auntie handed me an embroidered piece. The crown prince's treason, if this charge sticks. No one will dare protect him. Since I harbored intentions to harm him, I would have acted regardless of you too. Do what you must. What you cannot accomplish, your aunt will assist you. That very night, I finally understood why my aunt had never married. She had once had a daughter, but when the child was 5, while playing with the princess, her innocent words angered the crown prince. He maliciously pushed her into the water. All servants who knew the truth were silenced that very night by the imperial consort. Only the young eunuch tending the imperial garden escaped, revealing the truth to my aunt. Yet even that eunuch ultimately met his end. My aunt endured years of hardship within the palace, waiting for the day the crown prince would fall. Heaven's vengeance can be defied, but self-inflicted doom brings no escape. I clenched the pouch of powdered medicine in my hand, silently gazing toward the eastern palace. The nightmare that had haunted me for 2 lifetimes must now be ended. If the crown prince is incapable of protecting his family and country, the people should demand his abdication. If a man lacks virtue and cruelly harms women, then women should take action to punish and deter him. On the day of the festival, the whole realm rejoiced. My aunt placed the garments she had personally crafted into my hands. I rode in a carriage all the way to the eastern palace. Then, I personally handed the clothes my aunt had sewn to the crown prince. Xiao Shiyu saw me, his gaze deepening. Lady Shen, since you've come, would you care to accompany me in some amusement? I removed my hood, revealing my carefully adorned makeup, and smiled charmingly. After exchanging a glance with Yan Yang, she entered the inner chambers to assist Xiao Shiyu in donning his ceremonial robes. I remained where I stood, taking advantage of the moment when no one was watching to sprinkle a trace of pale powder onto my fingertips. As the Hu Xian melody filled the air, I began to dance, my flowing robe swirling gracefully. As my radiant smile fell into Xiao Shiyu's embrace, I placed my hands on his ears. Your Highness, I have always been at fault. I beg you not to involve the Shen family because of this lowly woman's momentary caprice. Xiao Shiyu, his face flushed, held me close. Though Shen Yao is disgraced, With you by my side, I find greater pleasure. Naturally, I shall not neglect the Shin family. I rose leisurely from his embrace. This servant is willing to attend to your highness tonight, awaiting your return from the celebration. Xiao Xiu, his mood greatly lifted, picked up his sword and strode out. The instant he left, I collapsed to the floor, my mind already clouded. Yan Yang hurriedly fed me the antidote. This drug has severe side effects. Why risk your life like this? I pierced my fingertip with a silver needle until dark blood flowed, then exhaled slowly. You can't catch fish without wading into the river. I forced myself to stay alert. Xiao Xiu practices martial arts. If you administered this poison, he'd detect it. But I know the acupoints, he'll never suspect. I looked at Yan Yang, her almond-shaped eyes brimming with tears. The rest is up to you. I clasped her hands. His Majesty won't fully believe those treasonous letters. If you face brutal interrogation. Yan Yang smiled faintly, still better than enduring daily torment with that beast. Having lived through 2 lifetimes, my resolve is as unshakable as rock. My decision stands firm. Outside the window, the sky darkened, as if hidden waves stirred beneath. Snow is coming again. Once the white blanket falls, this world will be renewed. Returning to the Imperial Pharmacy, I made a point to see His Majesty. Days of relentless toil had left him utterly exhausted. His Majesty treats me so kindly, yet I scheme against the Crown Prince and his throne. Should my plot be exposed, will His Majesty resent me? Noticing my arrival, His Majesty lifted his gaze from the candlelight. Why do you come without a word? Ah, why come empty-handed today? His displeasure was evident. I'm hungry. You always bring food. My eyes stung with tears, and I could only reply, I'll prepare it at once. Your Majesty, please wait. He smiled gently, don't make too much. My appetite has been poor lately. It would be a waste. I hurried out, leaning against the railing before the steps, tears falling silently. The Emperor is wise, yet the Crown Prince lacks virtue. Perhaps His Majesty suffers too. Between the Empire, its people, and his beloved son, how could the Emperor possibly choose? I had only half finished the longevity noodles when commotion erupted within the palace. The moment the Crown Prince ascended the city tower, the blazing light transformed his regalia into the Emperor's dragon robe. Between python and dragon, the difference is but a hair's breadth. My aunt's unique craftsmanship, who could have imagined such embroidery existed in this world? The consort Shu's agents moved swiftly, almost instantly raising cries of "Long live the Emperor!" from the crowd. Then, as if by fate, the Crown Prince's drugged state took hold. On the city tower, he spoke with brazen audacity, presuming to question His Majesty's longevity. To outsiders, these actions appeared indistinguishable from open rebellion. Escorted by the Emperor's imperial guards, the Crown Prince was brought to the Grand Hall, still ranting and raving that he alone was the rightful ruler. Yan Yang, moreover, delivered the treasonous correspondence between the Crown Prince and his ministers to the maternal clan of Consort Shu. I paused my work and gazed silently out the window. After all this effort, it was time for this to end. That very night, the Crown Prince was imprisoned in the Eastern Palace. Even when the imperial consort shed her hairpin in penance, and her father, the Grand Tutor, urgently petitioned the Emperor, His Majesty paid no heed. He sat alone upon his high throne, like an aged elder, his brow heavy with weariness. Aunt Chui knelt in plain robes within the hall. Before her lay the treasonous garments and 3 feet of white silk. Why have you done this? The Emperor gazed tremulously at the woman he had cherished for years, ultimately unable to bring himself to blame her. Did you truly not know? Aunt Chui wept bitterly. Or has our Anyan never held a place in your heart? As a princess of the former dynasty, I dared not serve at your Majesty's side. But Onion was innocent. She drowned at just 5 years old. I ask, Your Majesty, have you ever felt guilt toward her? Simply because her veins carried the blood of the former dynasty. Your Majesty feared us so deeply that you never even investigated her death. His Majesty finally lifted his head. I have never forgotten our daughter. But back then, the imperial consort held absolute power, and the former dynasty was unstable. Auntie slowly closed her eyes. You always have your reasons. Since things have come to this, please grant me death, Your Majesty. Shower. Outside the window, the snow had melted into rain, falling thick and fast, cold enough to make one shiver uncontrollably. I stood before the steps, hearing every word spoken inside. Consort Shu held the fifth prince's hand, gazing at me quietly. Yan Yang is gone. I looked at her blankly. She had planned this step long ago, clinging to the accusation of the crown prince's rebellion until her death in prison. Consort Shu clasped my hand. Only this way can the crown prince's case remain settled. She was his favored concubine, always by his side. Only with her death can everything be made credible. Distant palace halls stood majestic, ablaze with brilliant light. Yet why did all I see before me turn crimson? It felt as though I'd been in a deep slumber for ages. So long that Kai Wei nearly believed I would never wake. Yet I did awaken, tears streaming down her face. Kai Wei told me, Auntie has left the palace. Consort Shu has been elevated to imperial consort. The fifth prince has been taken to the grand hall by His Majesty for personal instruction. And the deposed crown prince? Kai Wei clasped my hand and spoke slowly. He is already on the road to Cheongzhou. Only, after regaining consciousness, the crown prince lashed out at you and Consort Shu. The imperial physician said he'd lost his reason. It seems he won't be returning. Awing. Kai Wei lowered her head. His Majesty said that the moment you awoke, he wished to see you at once. He has questions for you. I nodded. What must come will come. In this matter, I have ultimately failed His Majesty. Yet it unfolded differently than I'd imagined. When His Majesty saw me, he asked nothing. He merely smiled. Just as he always had. I once promised that if you achieved merit, I would elevate your rank. Now, shall I appoint you as third-rank imperial attendant? Your Majesty. Don't call me Your Majesty today, he said. His smile strained. Call me uncle instead. Tears fell from my eyes. Uncle. Regarding the matter of the deposed crown prince, I lifted my skirt and knelt. This servant is guilty. It is not your fault. His Majesty sighed. Having resided long within the palace walls, I was not fully aware of the crown prince's conduct. It was only when several ministers jointly petitioned that I came to understand his true nature. Whether personal grievances were mixed in or not, the fact remains, the crown prince was of poor character, lacking both virtue and ability. Awing. I do not blame you. I blame myself. The once wise monarch now looked bewildered. Enough. I am weary. You may withdraw. I bowed and departed. As I turned, the vast hall held only His Majesty's solitary figure. The highest seat is also the loneliest place. Returning to the imperial pharmacy, Kai Wei recounted every detail of my unconscious state. When she mentioned the Shin family's involvement in the crown prince's treason, Shin Hong had already been exiled to the frontier. She studied my expression carefully. Ayun, do you still grieve? I shook my head. Now, hearing the name Shin, it felt no different than any other stranger's family. It seems when you truly cease to care, even the memories fade away. In a few days, I'll journey south to seek medicinal herbs mentioned in ancient texts. Would you like to come? I looked at Kai Wei. Lady Li? Her mouth fell open. When did I become a lady? I requested it from His Majesty. I laughed and hugged her. You're the one who adores me most. Aren't you? So naturally I had to give you a little something to make you follow me wholeheartedly. Kaiwei was on the verge of tears. Rome. From now on, I'll give you all the pork knuckles. I'll never take them from you again. I chuckled helplessly. Before my departure, Consort Shu met with me one last time. I told her about the silver hairpin. She covered her face with a handkerchief, tears streaming down. He didn't think you were heartless, I said sadly. He only wished for your happiness. That hairpin bore your name. By destroying it, he was protecting you. The fifth prince now enjoys His Majesty's favor. Your Highness must not make any missteps. She choked silently. This has nothing to do with His Majesty. I sighed helplessly. But whom could she blame? Her own father had personally killed her beloved. Such a karmic bond. Yet I had no heart left to meddle in such matters. Everyone must walk their own path. I cannot take another's place. Fortunately, the fifth prince is a good man. Should he become a wise and enlightened ruler, perhaps he might offer some measure of atonement for this injustice. Passing by the Buddhist temple, we went to see Auntie Cui. She now lives as a nun, her hair still untied, and refused to come out to meet us. Only a young novice monk in the courtyard handed me a bundle, saying it contained her old belongings. Since the temple had only incense to burn, he entrusted me to take it out and burn it. Opening it carefully, I discovered it was the very poetry collection Auntie had cherished most. Every poem within was penned by His Majesty. They must have once loved each other deeply. Yet the world is vast and uncertain, between affection and resentment. The lines blur beyond recognition. I brought Kaiwei Enner, Yinnang's own younger brother. With no kin left in this world, I took it upon myself to accept him as my disciple. The three of us journeyed southward along the Yun River. Upstream, we witnessed peaceful villages. At the river's edge, children laughed and played. Atop Mount Hua, we gazed down upon boundless vistas. Though our journey sustained us with rainwater and wild berries, I felt life itself was profoundly real. No constraints, no condescension, no so-called destiny, only the scent of everyday life. Perhaps this is the ordinary existence of mortals. Perhaps this is the heavenly realm I've longed for across 2 lifetimes, a world where all people live in peace. The end.